Welcome to Naked Faith, where we take off the mask, drop the performance, and get honest about what really matters to follow Jesus. I'm Ron, and this is my amazing co-host Grace. And together, we're creating a space for real conversations, real stories, and real encounters with a love that never gives up. No agendas, no religious hype. Just real people sharing how God met them in the messy middle and pointing to one truth: Jesus still transforms lives. So whether you're walking strong or hanging on by a thread, you are welcome here. This is Naked Faith. So let's get into it. All right.
Great.
Well, welcome, Grace.
Yes, thank you.
So
Thank you,
here we
Ron.
are on episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time of this recording, our first episode will be launched officially. So if we get a little giddy here in a little bit, that's why.
Yes.
But so last week we talked a lot about who we were and what we wanted to do with this thing. And we decided that we were going to have a very probably controversial discussion about what really is women's role.
In the
So
Bible, yeah.
in the Bible, well, I say in life, right?
In life too, yeah.
I mean, if you're living a biblical life, then wouldn't that apply? How do I
Yeah,
say that? You know what I'm saying,
I know.
right?
Yes, yes.
Like if the Bible and following God is following my life, then what the Bible teaches me is how we should act, right?
Right.
So
But again, not everyone follows the Bible, so we have to be understanding of that as well.
no, I get that, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, so before we get in, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts?
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where this series goes, because I believe we'll kind of be focusing on a different woman in the Bible each episode for the next few weeks or so. And today we're starting with the very beginning with Adam and Eve, the very first woman in the Bible. And yeah, I'm interested to see what you have to say and where this conversation goes. So
All right.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So hey, before we get there, so I think one of the things that surrounds this is like what women's role is, and it really comes into the controversy of this relationship between men and women. And so I think in order to get really real about this, we have to start in the middle of the story and then go to the beginning. So the middle of the story takes us into the New Testament, and
Mm.
um and just follow along with me, Grace, because it all makes sense in a minute, right?
Okay. Yeah. I
So
trust you.
yeah, the middle of the story takes us into the New Testament, where Paul writes a letter to Timothy. Um, and so Timothy is the church in Ephesus, or he's the leader of the church in Ephesus, and also a disciple of Paul. And so he writes this letter to Timothy. And so there's questions about this letter, but really, let's just get to the content of what was in the letter, which I think is what causes the controversy, right? So this is 1 Timothy 2, verses 10 through 14, and it says, "In like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. Let the women learn in silence and all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over to the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, was in the transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety." All right. So
Wow, that's a
th-
lot.
that's a lot, right? So that last part, right? That's kind of what, as we were prepping yesterday, we talked about this, and
Hmm.
this verse stuck out, right? So like, oh, hey, let's talk about that. Really, let's go back to the beginning. So I wanted to read that verse to kind of frame it,
Mm.
but then now you think, okay, so the last one. So Adam was formed first, then
Hmm.
Eve. All right. So that actually has its own controversy as well. So let's go to the beginning, shall we?
I mean, I feel like there's so much we could say about that verse alone that you just quoted, but yeah, that's just a preface to the story of Adam and Eve for
Well,
now.
yeah, I agree with you, Grace, and I think maybe that sets up the conversation over hopefully the next couple of weeks, right? Like,
Right.
let's we're gonna try to like pick this apart and figure out how we interpret it and what it means, But
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, so let's go to the beginning, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So here's like let's talk about. So this all begins in Genesis 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
and um, there's a couple of things I just want to point out, and I don't know like if this will take us down the rabbit hole that we're looking for, but like
Okay.
this is actually kind of interesting to me, right? So like when I go to Genesis 1 and 2, it
Mm-hmm.
appears to be that there's two creation stories or
Mm.
two versions of creation,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because Genesis 1 opens up in the beginning and it describes how God created the universe and how everything came into existence, right? The six
Mm-hmm.
days of work and the seventh day of rest. But on the sixth day, um, God created humanity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it
Sure.
says, and then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. Yeah, in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let me ask you, what does that invoke? Like what response or what are you thinking when you hear that?
Oh man, I mean, I feel like I need to read it again for myself. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. What comes to me reading that is God being the ultimate creator and artist, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How any piece of art is a form of self-expression, and the creation of the universe is God's own form of self-expression. And so then to create mankind in his own image almost sounds kind of selfish. He's creating something of his. Yeah, just the concept of art and creation in general, and how much life has evolved since this point. Because when I read, male and female, he created them, I'm like, well, nowadays, there's a lot more evolution of human where we have non-binary and all kinds of gender, you know, identities and sexualities. And so it's it's just interesting to go back to the very beginning and see what started it all. And even going to the previous verse of let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. And that, especially, I'm like, I read that as a way of respecting the earth that we live on. You know, we as humans have a right and responsibility to uphold the wonders and beauty of nature that the universe and God has created.
Mm-hmm.
And so it saddens me that, we're at a point where we are at in society right now where the earth is kind of retaliating um with everything that's happened over the last few decades. So, um yeah, that's all I have to say about, I guess, creation in general and mankind for now.
Yeah. So, hey, that's a whole
I know, that's a
topic
whole.
that you just
I
brought
know.
up is like dominion and authority and what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
So, like, uh, man, that's one of the ones I want to get into because that gets into the spiritual realm that we talked about
Mm-hmm.
first, right? Like, so that's just really cool. So, um, I'll put a pin in that because I think we'll come back to that. because we
Like we
can
could have a
really,
whole episode about that
yeah, we can have a
specifically.
whole episode. We can have a whole series of episodes about that, right?
Right,
But
right.
um, so I guess what stands out for me is like when I read this, it says male and female. So like in the first Genesis 1, there's this creation story that tells us how the universe came into existence, right? And then not to diminish what you said about um modern thinking versus, at the time that the Bible was written. And I think that's a key to remember, that you know the Bible was written in a time. You have to go into the context of when it was written, right? Like what was happening during the time when the Bible was written, and what was the knowledge base of people at that time, right?
Yeah.
So I bring this back to, like, if you look at today, we today understand that the universe as a whole is way more complex than what the first century Jews would have known or understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring up, like, you know, uh, even in this story, and I am gonna bring this back to the Eve's role and Eve discussion, but
Mm-hmm.
like in this context, right? They describe the sky as being a dome of water, and they describe, there's a dome of water above us and there's a dome of water below us, and then in those two domes there's this landmass that exists, and we live on this landmass, right? So we know now that there's really no dome of water above us, right? When you look up and you see the blue sky, we know now that's the way that the light spectrum of the sun reflects off the Earth's atmosphere, which creates the blue sky. It's not a dome of water, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't think, you kind of go back to, they didn't understand that. They didn't know anything about space and stars and the vastness of the universe and the complexity and all that stuff. So, like, I just bring that up to not to diminish what you said about the complexities even of human
Yeah.
sexuality today,
Mm-hmm.
but more just to point out, like, okay, don't get hung up on, hey, it only talks about these two things in the Bible, right? It's more that they didn't understand the complexity, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say,
Of
right?
course. Of course.
Yeah,
I totally get that. And to that point, just real quick, like I actually saw like a stand-up comedy set once where, someone was kind of defending in a way of, well, they only mentioned male and female because the whole point at this point in time was they needed to populate the earth, you know? So,
yeah. I mean, that's one way to look at it,
yeah. But, very general, basic point of that. That was,
Well,
yeah. That was all.
I mean, you gotta, you know, not to offend anyone, but I mean, the survival of humanity relies on men and women having children.
Yeah, I know. Yes. Yes. And, there's been a lot of evolution in medication and technology as well. And we're also at a point right now where we don't necessarily need to continue populating the earth just with everything going on. But yeah, anyways, I know. It's a whole other conversation. But back to Adam and Eve.
Right. So here's the other thing. Okay, so that's Genesis 1, and it talks about the creation of the earth, and then, like, this one always stuck out with me, that in the image of God he created, male and female he created it. So if I'm reading this version of the creation story, then I'm coming away with this, that when humanity was created, that there were male and female created, meaning that there's an equality. There's a it wasn't Adam was created and then there's this secondary creature that was created from Adam and that we call woman. It basically says that we were created at the same time, which then would lead you to believe that there's an equality, right? Like there's an equality between men and women in the eyes of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would take from that.
Okay, I get that. Yeah.
But then now we go to Genesis 2, and in the second, and like, this is getting into really some deep theological stuff here about, like, oh, how come there's this second story that talks about creation? But just some things that I would kind of want to point out that I thought was interesting. And it says, Let me find it. Then it says, then in chapter Genesis 2, verse 7, it says, then the Lord God formed a man from the dust. And so it's important that the word man here in Hebrew is Adama, which means humanity, right?
Okay.
From the dust of the ground. So it wasn't singularly. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Adama is humanity. The word Adam comes from the word Adama, which is humanity.
Okay. Yeah. Got that.
And then breathe into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now, here's the interesting thing. Check this out. Now, the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. So if you go back to the Hebrew, like literally plucked and placed a man in the garden. So like this is the part you go, okay, so where, if in the first story we talk about there were male and female, humanity was created, and then he places this person in the garden, then where did that creation part happen, right? Was there this existence of humanity outside of the garden, and he placed one individual in the garden, and there's a whole theological thing there to, right? Like, because the garden would be God's sacred space, and we're not. Later on in the story of Moses, we learn that we can't be in the presence of God because of such goodness that he has, that in our physical material form of humans, we would not survive that experience, which is why when we die, our soul goes to heaven, our spirit goes to heaven, and not the body, right? Because our spirit can withstand that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But here's the other thing. All right. So now we learn in this version of Genesis that so God places this creature that he created in the garden, and then he creates everything else. And so he then parades these creatures that he created, these non-human creatures, in front of the creature that he created, and he allows that creature to name them. And they're in pairs, right? So like when the cows come, there's a male and female cow. When the dogs come, there's a male and female dog. There's a male and female bird, right? There's two of each entity that's paraded in front of the person, and he names those. So so verse 20 says, so the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals, but for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So then this is where it really gets interesting. And then there's another thing I learned today as I was doing some research for this, that Grace, like, I'm going to say it and you're going to totally, like, you'll get it and you'll be like, oh my gosh, so it said, so the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The word rib in Hebrew, and I'm going to totally mess this up, but it's called sila, I think is how you actually pronounce it.
Okay.
But that word means side. So if you were to do a word study in the Bible of the word sila, then you'll find several instances. But only twice does it refer to the rib, but every other time it refers to the side, right? Like a side of something,
Okay. Yeah.
So, now yesterday we were doing our show prep, I made this profound statement to you, and I'm about to make it right now. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. What's your proof? Right. So I have receipts to back this up.
Okay. Yeah.
But so if you think of this in the word of side, so one of my sources of information that I listen to often in my free time, because I just love these guys, is the Bible Project. And so the Bible Project is phenomenal. Like, these guys break it down to the, where the common person can understand what this is. And so they did a whole series on this, right? Like the Eden story and Eve and Adam and what their roles were.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two guys who talked, just to give them credit, because I don't know if they'll ever listen to this, probably not, but just want to make sure that I acknowledge that
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It's Dr. Tim Mackey and John Collins are the hosts of that podcast. Plus, they create this whole site. So, anyway, in one of the episodes, they talked about this. And so Dr. Mackey said, like, the way this is written and the interpretation is that when Adam was put into a deep sleep, that there was literally a splitting of this creature. Like it wasn't a rib, right? It was this creature was made into two. And in the two halves became the male and the female. So one half was given, the male parts, I guess to say, and the other half was given the female parts. But then Adam, so when the woman was presented to the other half, Adam recognized that this creature was like him, was like part of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now when you think about, okay, so this creature was literally split apart from him, taken from his side, and now they're meeting for the first time, and they recognize that they're the same, but they're different. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then he goes on to say, that is why man leaves his father and mother, becomes one flesh. And it goes on to say, now, here's the really cool thing. This is the part I was going to say. Like, and this is kind of a side, but I just this was really mind blowing to me, right?
Okay.
So Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was reading and researching this, the word naked came up, right? And,
right.
The reason why, there's many reasons why this was profound to me, because obviously the name of our podcast is Naked Faith, and the word naked, right? And so this guy goes on to say that this word naked has multiple layers of meaning in it, and that one, naked meaning what we think it is. They didn't have any clothes because they felt no shame. Now, I'm going to say some words, because of our training, hopefully these start resonate with you.
Okay.
They felt no shame. They felt freedom to talk to one another. They felt that there was no judging. There was no nothing. That this word naked means this complete authentic self to be themselves in front of one another.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, for me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's really kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, to be fully present with someone else and there's no other considerations, nothing mentally stopping you from just being yourself with that person.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And then they also just happen to be naked and not wearing any clothes, like.
Yeah, but I mean, think about that, right? Like, they can be themselves, right? Like, and so you weren't really worried, right? Okay,
it's like, like, I was going to say, it's like children, they have no sense of like what's right or wrong most of the time. They play with each other and they're just there with the person, and they're able to enjoy their time together, and it's not like they necessarily have anything stopping them from being with someone else and having fun and whatnot. Children are like the most present human beings, I think, on Earth.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. They're so.
Well, I've said for a while, like, hate is a learned trait. I don't think we're born inherently hateful. I mean, it just goes back to what you were just saying, right? If you look at how children interact with one another, they interact in a way that they don't care, right? There's no filters there. There's nothing, right? They just want to play, they want to be happy, and they want to be themselves, right?
Yeah.
But I think then as we get older, they're learned. It's these, to me, the hate and the biases and the things that we get caught up with in our life, these are all learned traits that you learn from your environment, whether you learn from your parents, you learn from your other friends, people, like all experiences, like so I'm totally with you on that. I think and we could learn a lot from just
and I even think about, because I used to be a toddler teacher a couple of years ago, and I think about the toddler age is a very interesting age as well, of they're growing they're not babies anymore, but they're not necessarily like, you know, they're still kids. But anyways, like toddlers interacting with each other, you know, they want different things. And that's
Mhm.
kind of where conflict starts sometimes of like one kid wants to do one thing, but their friend wants to do another thing. And so they, you know, a lot of times they're able to just naturally be like, okay, let's do that. Or, but other times, you know, they can fight. And so it's interesting how that dynamic plays out. But yeah, I feel like,
We all just be like, okay, let's just do that.
right. Yeah, right. Um,
Okay, whatever you want to do today, Grace, let's just go do that.
right. As long
No,
as
I want to
it's
do this thing, but you know what? It's all right.
right. All right, we're back. We had some technical difficulties there, but we are back, and let's move on. Ron.
All right. Okay, so all right, so I think I set the stage here, and like we wanted to get into this, like what was Eve's role,
Mm.
and so all right, with all that's been said, I guess I just want to hear from you. Like, what are your thoughts on this, right? Like, so
Yeah.
if, and I'm going to rephrase this so we can get right back into the context,
Mhm.
right? So if we go into this premise of that there was a literal splitting of whatever this being
Mhm.
was, because Eve was not taken from a rib, it was taken from the side. And so now you have these two entities that recognize their differences but recognize their similarities, and one is male and one is female. And in my opinion, that they were created to be equal.
Mhm.
So I don't know, like that's kind of where I want to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot there that I could talk about because when I think about them being completely equal and they're the same entity, that makes me think about more spiritual things that I think about and believe in as far as every single human being holds masculine and feminine energy within themselves. We all have our
Mm-hmm.
own masculine and feminine. It's like the yin and the yang energies. And
Hmm.
so for that to kind of be in it, the very first example of that, you know, they're because if you like, are you saying that Adam and Eve were one and they're basically just split into two separate
Well,
beings?
that's kind of my interpretation. Like as I look at this, right? Like, okay, I was brought up when I first became a Christian in my teenage years,
Mm.
and this has been a journey, right? And so when I look at what, like, okay, so not to get, but I first started going to church in a very strict Southern Baptist church.
Okay.
And so if you understand, again, I don't want to display anybody's belief system or denomination or whatever, but the Southern Baptists were very strict and very hard line on their things. And so when you first hear this story, I was told, and I believed this for many years, that you know Eve was taken from a rib
Mm-hmm.
of Adam. And then for many years I believed, like, what puzzled me was, okay, if that were true, then why do men and women have the same number of ribs, right? Like if we're not, if Eve was formed from a rib in Adam, then theoretically would we have one less rib than women?
That's
But we
taking it
don't.
literally, yes. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
right, but this is what I was told, right? So I believe the stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
so so when you think about that, right, you're like, okay, so if Eve was taken from a rib of Adam, then what does that mean, right? And then this is where you get into the what did you learn? Well, okay, well, Eve was a part of Adam, meaning Adam came out of Eve, and therefore she's separate but equal, but not really equal.
Mm.
Kind of sort of equal.
Okay. Because she was
Does that make sense?
because she was simply taken as a rib. Okay.
Right. Like she was taken from a piece of
Yeah.
Adam and then created this
So
being.
so then
So
people then construe that as women are not equal or Eve was not equal to Adam.
yeah, and I think for me what gets very confusing is sometimes when you listen to like pastors talk about this, they're like, "Oh, no. No, it really was, we're on equal footing, but
Mm.
women can't really do this stuff."
Mm.
Well, if we're on equal footing, then why aren't they allowed to do that stuff?
Yeah.
we get back to like what really brought this up was what are women's roles in the church,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're saying to me, and this is where like I struggled with for years, is if you're saying to me that in this story that we were created at the same and we were created equally in the eyes of God, then all the spiritual things that we were given authority as God's creation here on earth to do, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't be gender specific. It should be whatever gifts that the good Lord gave you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had the gift of leadership, whether you were male or female, then shouldn't you be able to serve in that role?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what happens is in some people's minds, it's all this programming, right? Like, okay, if I'm led to believe that Eve became a part of Adam or came from a piece of Adam, and so then I'm wholly led to believe that man, and let's talk about the physical man, was the only creature that existed at the time, and from there was this female that was formed.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's in contradiction to what the very first story of Genesis says, which is where God created male and female.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
Does that make sense?
I do. I get that. That makes sense. Yes. Because when I think about how in the first chapter it says male and female created, like he created them together, I think of it as like the second chapter is then diving deeper into that exact story and exactly what happened when he created both of them. But I do believe that they were created equally. So
right.
There's a lot I could say about my own interpretation of all of this because, factually, if we look at science and evolution, like Adam and Eve aren't necessarily the first human beings or what they've been depicted as, in the Garden of Eden. I wouldn't consider them to be the very first human beings. Like we know that Neanderthals, and cavemen, came first on Earth. And so to think about that aspect, in order for it to make sense for me, I've interpreted it as Adam and Eve are kind of the interpretation of humans that were created in like a dream world, in a dream realm. Because I'm someone who's very attuned to dreams and dream work specifically. I've been studying my own dreams for years now, and so to think about other possible realms and like you were saying, the spiritual realm and stuff, I wonder if this story that was created about Adam and Eve, could that have been a real creation? Adam and Eve are real, but in this dream world, in this dream spiritual world. That's just something I've been pondering recently with that. Because I'm like, well, here on Earth, we know exactly what the human beings were, where they started, how they started, where they came from. And so it's like, what exactly, or who exactly are Adam and Eve? In order for it to really coincide, in order for the Bible to kind of coincide with humanity and reality on Earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, interesting. So I guess if let's explore this thread for a minute,
okay.
Just so I can understand.
Yes.
So I can understand how this occurs for you. Is okay. So if this was a dream state, in whose dream would this be? I mean, does the dream have to be a person's dream, or is it? Are you saying that there's like another realm that's kind of a dream-like?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. Because I'm like, it could be both. I think it could be another realm where this did occur or is occurring. And it could have been a dream that one of the first human beings had.
Huh. Yeah.
Because if I get deeper into the actual story of Eve and my own interpretation of it and just the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil, I think about how maybe she had a dream where this serpent came to her in a dream and told her to eat from the fruit. And so then maybe she woke up the next day and, felt called to kind of eat the apple, eat the fruit of the tree. But I know that might not be in the specific scripture, but it's interesting to me that in the creation of Eve, God put Adam into a deep sleep, you know? And like she was created as he was sleeping. And it's like, for me, I feel like that expands the dream realm in that sense, as far as this being was created while he was sleeping, you know?
Yeah. Huh. Interesting take. No. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like.
No, I know.
It's
just funny to see your response and reaction to it. That's just.
Well, no.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting take. I mean, it's to me, it's fascinating because like we can all read this and then come away with something, a different interpretation or a different thought process of what that means.
Yeah.
Like, but no, that's actually kind of fascinating because I've never really done any analysis or study in dreams and dream interpretation.
Yeah.
I know, like later on there's prophets that had dreams. So this is kind of cool. And
right.
I know
And there's a whole story of Joseph, like, and he had all these dreams. He was literally like a dream, he has his dream coat. Yeah.
Right. Well, and then there's, oh my gosh, I'm trying to, too much stuff out of my brain. But, some of the prophets had a dream. Like they talk about prophecies, the prophets, right? How did prophecies come? And some had direct, what appeared to be direct communication with God, but often it was communicated in their dreams.
Can I tell you what I'm picturing with this specific scripture and story?
Sure. Yeah.
So, I think about, because as it was said, Adam was kind of plucked and put into the Garden of Eden, correct? So I'm thinking he went to sleep in the Garden of Eden and he had a dream, maybe, that Eve was taken from his rib, or, however he was created, if they were split in two, what have you, as you said. And then he woke up and, she was there beside him, Like, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this version of Adam, he had a dream where his rib, because dreams are so weird, right? Like I had a dream the other night where my teeth were falling out, and so to think about, he could have had a dream where he looked down and his rib quite literally was being taken out from him. That's just the symbolism of it. That might not have been necessarily exactly what happened, but the visual and symbol, the imagery of a rib being taken from your side can have a lot of meaning to it. And so then that could have been the entire dream, just looking down and he saw a rib being taken from him. And then he woke up the next day and there's this woman beside him. And because you think about Adam's perspective, he went to sleep and woke up the next day and suddenly there was a person with him, And so to think about how powerful that could be. And then I think about, continuing the story of Genesis, if when they both fell asleep that following night, maybe Eve had a dream and that's where the serpent came to her. And again, like the serpent is a certain symbolizes a certain thing. And also the serpent is able to communicate with her. Like the serpent speaks to her. And it's like on Earth, we don't necessarily have that ability to do that. And so it's in a dream. It's like, okay, maybe they were actually able to communicate in some way. Even maybe telepathically as well. And, the serpent tells her to eat from the tree. I don't have the exact scripture on me right now, but we know the story, I feel,
we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Yeah. And so the serpent tells her to eat from the tree, and it's like, if this is a dream, maybe she woke up the next day and she could have eaten the apple in her dream, but we know that she also did actually eat the apple. So if she woke up the next day and kind of took that message from her dream of like, okay, I feel like something is telling me to eat this, that I need to eat this. And when she had that dream, she didn't know that the serpent was necessarily evil. Um, you know, she possibly had this dream and woke up and was like, something's telling me that I need to eat this. Because God told Adam, don't eat from that tree. So Adam knows not to do that. But then Eve never was told that.
Oh, this is so good. So good. So good.
Like, Eve was never told that directly by God. Although I could get into the whole fact that, like, the serpent could be a form of God, that still told her to do that. Um, but so then she ate the apple the next day, and then for some reason Adam also decided to eat the apple, even though God told him not to, but then Eve, I guess, did tell him to, and he was like, yeah, I trust you, and your inner knowing, your intuition, and then as soon as that happened, that's when God kind of came into the picture and displayed this kind of shame on them.
Oh, this is so good.
So that kind of encapsulates my understanding and inner interpretation of Adam and Eve.
Okay, so can you entertain me for a second?
Of course.
I wanna offer an alternative view here. So I have many friends that, and I'm not going to mention their names on this podcast because I don't have their permission, but many friends that are in the ministry, and because I thrive, like, this is the stuff that fascinates me, right? So what if the story of Adam and Eve was a temple story, meaning that it wasn't really, like, maybe it didn't really happen that way, but it was more a story that was written to explain how we have to function,
right? And society. How we know, because it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and it's like, how did we come to this point of knowing good and bad, or like, having those views?
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we do know in the Bible there are factual events that happened that can be proved, right? And then we also know that there are Jesus himself used parables, told stories to illustrate a point.
Right.
And then we also know that there was there are things that aren't in the literal sense, but it was in the figurative sense to, again, prove to emphasize a point that the person was trying to make.
Yeah, it's all storytelling in a way. I think.
Correct. Yeah. So now getting into the spiritual realm that we talked about. And again, I'm just going to key this up because, man, I tell you what, Grace, we could, like, oh my gosh, we could spend weeks on this. So in the spiritual realm, so first of all, and this might irritate some people who are listening to this, but when you look at this, and remember when I say context, right? You got to understand context. And so when you look at the hold on. I have a book. I'm going to show it.
Okay. If you can see it. Nope.
Yeah. Nope. Okay. It's called Ancient Near Eastern Thought and the Old Testament.
Okay.
And it's written by John Walton.
Okay.
And this is a fascinating book, and it's introducing the conceptual world of the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
And so, again, another book that I learned from the Bible Project podcast. And this book is often quoted and cited about different things. So what this book tells you is that if you look throughout the ancient Eastern thoughts and religions that existed at the time, there's a lot of similarities between Christianity or between Judaism, because that was the form at the time, and these other religions. There's similar stories. There's similar, happenings of what happened. And so here's where the difference becomes. When you look at all these other Eastern religion philosophies, the gods were portrayed as individuals who created humanity to serve their purposes. Meaning, the gods wanted food, so they created humans to grow food for the gods,
Okay.
right? Or the gods wanted, the gods wanted sexual partners, so they created humans to have sexual partners, right?
Okay.
Like you look at all these different things, and it's humanity was created to serve those gods as like in a slave-like fashion, right? What makes Judaism and Christianity different is the God of the Bible created humanity so that he could serve us.
Oh.
Which is really different, right? He didn't create humanity to serve his purposes. He doesn't need us. If God is the ultimate being and can do, created the universe, he doesn't need humanity. We need him, right? But yet the story of Jesus is God comes down in human form to serve the creation that he created. He died on a cross for us.
Right, okay.
How many other religion stories do you see that? There's no other gods that sacrifice themselves to save the creation that they created. So this is what makes Judaism, Christianity different in the aspect that our God is portrayed as a God who serves us because he loves us so much. He loves his creation. So that's a diversion. And I know I need to stay focused, but so let's go back to what you said. And so like this dream world thing, like that would be really cool topic to explore sometime. Like I would love to hear more about that. That's kind of fascinating because, I ain't gonna lie, Gray, there's lots of times I've woken up and had this really bizarre dream. And I'm like, maybe I go see one of those dream interpreters and say, what does that really mean?
I'm right here.
Okay, great. Well, I know that from now on. Like, I have this dream. What did that really mean? Like, am I supposed to eat the oatmeal or not? Like, I don't know. But
yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, so cool. Like, all right, so you made this point and segue. Genesis 3. Let's talk about that. All right, so they're in this garden, and the Garden of Eden represents this sacred space that God resides in. So if you think about the Garden of Eden is this holy place that God lives within his creation.
Okay.
So if we think about the heavens and the earth, right? So the heavens, when we say heavens, like this is this mystical place that nobody can really comprehend. Like, what is that? Where is it? What does it do?
We all have our own interpretation, imagination of it,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, okay, so God exists in this heavenly realm. And again, that's where I go like, there's this multidimensional realm that exists. And
oh my. Yeah, so I think next week we're really going to dive more into Genesis 3 and expand on that even more because we are heading to about an hour now and we want to wrap up. Is there anything else you want to say, Ron, before I give the outro?
No, yeah. So I was on a roll and sorry that we're having a few technical glitches today, but we will finish this conversation next week when we dive into Genesis 3, as Grace just said. So yeah. Hey, hopefully you guys are enjoying the conversation, and then I'll turn it over to Grace to wrap us up.
I guess it's just kind of like an ongoing conversation, be sure to follow.
Super fascinating, by the way. I mean, like, I definitely would want to really this. Your interpretation of the dream world, like that fascinates me. So I'd love to definitely, one day.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to continue the conversation. But yeah, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and Spotify, Naked Faith Podcast. We are pretty much all over the place. So if you look up Naked Faith Podcast, you'll be sure to find us pretty much anywhere. You can also follow me.
Are we live?
What?
Are we live now?
I think we are. Our first episode is out now. So be sure to check us out on all the platforms. And I will plug myself as well. I have my own platform as well, Grace T Video. You can also find on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. So, yeah, we love having you guys here. Thank you for being here with us, and we look forward to speaking more with you guys soon.
All right, see you next week.
All right, bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.